From A&E, this is Biography. And A&E's salute to the movers and shakers in Hollywood, the Hollywood Hotshots. And now, on location in Hollywood, Peter Graves.
Welcome. Welcome to my hometown, Hollywood. The town is getting ready for the Oscars next week, and we're here in the gallery of the Motion Picture Academy, where sets from some recent blockbuster films are on display, and where we begin our week-long tribute to some of the hottest stars in show business today. To kick it off, we've got the guy who is being called the comic superstar of the 90s. Some critics think he is gross, idiotic, crude, but to audiences around the world, Jim Carrey has raised stupidity to an art form, and a highly profitable one. His salary for his next film is an astonishing $20 million. And yet, he's no overnight success. Jim Carrey has paid his dues, and he has found that over-the-top style that would make him a star. Tonight, in a world premiere biography, we look at the life of America's favorite clown, Jim Carrey.
The world knows him as the manic, irrepressible star of Batman, The Mask, and the Ace Ventura movies.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance.
But Jim Carrey is far from an overnight success. His story is truly one of trial and error, and laughing all the way to the bank.
Let's do another one.
As a teenager, he was so poor, his family lived in a VW bus.
You might want to zoom in on this, Rex, because there could be a tear.
As a struggling young performer, he made a desperate promise that drove him onward.
Jim wrote a check to himself years ago for acting services rendered.
$10 million. And he used to keep that check in his back pocket. And he said, someday I'm going to cash that check.
And on the day the check was dated, Jim Carrey was worth $10 million.
It paid off. I mean, he cashed it.
Today, he is the highest paid comic actor. But for Jim, it never was about the money.
I don't think he wants it to overshadow the work itself.
In this scene, my legs are being consumed by two vicious malamutes.
Jim Carrey stepped out of a cartoon right into life. He's like a cartoon.
He's kind of like a human sponge.
Too much pressure on me.
You have to be careful what you do around him because it will wind up in a movie. You know, he just absorbs everything around him, which is really what all good actors do.
I'd like to go way back now.
I could use a good laugh. You're on in 5.
It was almost inevitable that Jim Carrey would grow up funny. Jim's father, Percy Carrey, was a legendary cut-up in the Carrey clan.
He was always the comedian, too. Every relative I know and every person I've ever met says that my dad was just the funniest man they've ever met.
Percy Carey had show business in his blood. He was a saxophone player who once fronted a big band in Toronto. But when he married Jim's mom, Kay, Percy gave up the band and took up accounting. Still, Percy Carey never lost his love of performing.
I remember him playing saxophone and clarinet when we were little kids. And when him and my mom were going out together, my mom would sing with a band, and my dad would play saxophone. And, that's what they did.
The Careys were a close-knit and loving clan with 4 children. First came Sister Pat, then Brother John, and Sister Rita. James Eugene Carey, the youngest, was born on January 17, 1962, and spent the first 4 years of his life in the picturesque town of Aurora, Ontario, Canada. In one of his earliest movie appearances, we see Jim tending to a tiny newborn niece. Everyone in the Carey family agrees Jim must have inherited a comedy gene from his naturally funny father, because even as a youngster, little Jim was a cut-up.
He had this little white mouse that he used to like to let go because it would freak my mom out. And it would run around the house and she'd be screaming and we'd have to chase it in the middle of the night because the mouse got loose, My mom hated that mouse.
At about the age of 8 or 9, young Jim discovered he had a talent for making faces. He would lock himself in his room and practice mugging in his mirror for hours on end. 12 years later, it was part of his stage act.
I think I probably spent most of my entire life looking in the mirror. It's true. But I haven't been staring at me. I've been staring at Leonid Brezhnev. Jack Nicholson. E.T. the extraterrestrial.
It seems like Jim was always destined to be a performer. But when Jim was 13, a catastrophe struck the Carrey household that would affect his entire life. Jim's dad, Percy Carrey, lost his job as a controller for a company in Burlington, Ontario.
He was like 42 years old, couldn't get another job as an accountant because they wanted, a younger guy. And so he was out of work. So, I took my babysitting money and gave it for groceries. My other brother, John, who worked at the time, he gave his paychecks to pay, whatever our bills were, and that's what we did.
As the family scrambled to keep a roof over their heads, young Jim went through a personality change at school. The cheerful kid turned introspective.
He was troubled. I think he was sensitive about the fact that his father was out of work.
Out of money and out of luck, the Carreys were soon on the move again. This time they left their home in a comfortable section of Burlington and headed for an industrial park in the town of Scarborough. Percy had taken a job as a security guard at Titan Wheels, a factory that made steel rims and wheels. And as part of the deal, the Carreys got to move into a stone house right next to the factory. But the entire family had to work at the plant.
We all worked at the factory. My dad was security guard all night. I did the offices. Jim did the downstairs offices. We waxed, we cleaned, we polished, we did everything. Urinals, you got it, you name it, we did it. And it was hell.
For more than a year, the Carrey family worked the graveyard shift at Titan Wheels. Jim worked nights and attended high school part-time. But in the 9th grade, Jim gave up on school altogether. He told his dad all he wanted to do was sleep. Jim's mom, Kay, tried to make the best of a grim situation.
Every Friday night we'd go over to the factory, and she'd bring over a couple dozen hot dogs and buns, and we'd cook them in the microwave, because we never had a microwave, and a microwave was a big thing then, right? Jim would just start doing ballet and jumping from picnic table to picnic table in the cafeteria, and we'd all have a great time.
But even the legendary Carrey humor eventually ran out of steam. There really wasn't much to cheer about at Titan Wheels.
Because we lived right there beside the factory, it was like you were always on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My mom and dad never had a holiday. They'd let us kids go, away for the weekend or whatever, but they were always there. So, they became bitter and hateful because they could never do anything either.
Years later, Jim would joke about his grueling nights at Titan Wheels, but even an impressionist as great as Jim Carrey could not mask the pain.
You might want to zoom in on this, Rex, because there could be a tear. No, it just made me realize that you got to do what you love to do. You got to go after whatever you love to do, because it's not worth being where you're not happy.
When they realized they couldn't go on at Titan Wheels, the Carreys quit. But quitting meant they had to leave the factory-owned house. So they pitched a tent on Sister Pat's lawn and lived out of an old beat-up VW bus. Jim later said it was like the grapes of wrath.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Years of therapy down the drain. No, we went through hard times, my family and stuff, and kind of lived in a van for a while and pitched a tent on my sister's lawn, and, we were like gypsies for a little while, but it's all... Actually, we were happier than we were before that, where we were doing jobs that we didn't enjoy.
The lessons Jim learned from these years were bitter ones, but young Jim grew tough. He decided to make his way by doing what he really loved, comedy.
Our biography of Jim Carrey will continue here on A&E. You are watching our biography of Jim Carrey here on A&E.
When Percy Carey found work, the Careys moved out of the camper and into a house in Jackson's Point, 2.5 hours north of Toronto. Jim was 15 and holding on to his dream of making it in comedy. One night, Percy drove Jim back down into Toronto for open mic nights at a comedy club.
My father actually brought me down to a place called Yuck Yucks in Toronto when I was, first of all, when I was 15. And I kind of worked up an act, and we wrote it together, and I got up on stage, and I remember the owner of the club stood backstage with a microphone and some wonderful little sound effects going, totally boring, totally boring, totally boring, you know, like that. And I had what do they call those, leisure suit on, and it kind of booed me out of the place.
I think he almost gave up. I really do. I think it almost shattered him. And my dad was the one who said, no, it's okay. We can change things. It's okay. You don't have to be, not everybody's going to like you.
After being heckled off the stage at Yuck Yucks, Jim was so shaken he didn't perform in public again for 2 years. His family became his audience as he and his dad polished his act, honed it, and Jim returned to Yuck Yucks 2 years later.
Then he came back when he was about 16 or 17 and immediately started doing very, very well with his impressions. And I can't think of very many other comics who passed through here that got so good so quickly.
Those first comedy gigs were amateur night freebies, but it wasn't long before Jim was booked on regular shows and getting rave reviews for his remarkable impersonations.
I think it was about 30 years ago today, way back.
He was just a boy, but he knew so much. I'd been in the business for years before that. And then all of a sudden I see this kid go up and just totally tear a room apart, and polished and very classy. And I just sat there and I was blown away. I have no other words for it.
I thought he was great, and so I asked him to work with me, and he would open a show for me, and he said, great. And so we worked together. I forget exactly how many dates up there. It could have been 4, 6, or 8 dates. I'm not sure. But we worked around Canada in a few days, and I was going to open in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. So I brought him to Vegas with me. He was happy to go to Vegas from Canada, the first shot and everything else.
Jim Carrey was on his way, and nobody was more proud than his dad, Percy. But with success came a difficult choice. If Jim was going to go for his dream, there was only one place he could do it: Hollywood. He made a few forays to Los Angeles, then finally moved there in 1981 when he was just 19. In Canada, he was a star, but on those early trips to the Sunset Strip, he was just another wide-eyed innocent with big dreams.
And I was completely out of my element down here because there were these, hookers and stuff coming up to me in the street. People, these women with mini skirts and stuff, and asking me out on dates and stuff. And I thought it was Sadie Hawkins Day.
Jim didn't have to wait long for recognition in Los Angeles. At the Comedy Store, he was soon knocking them dead with the routine he'd perfected in 1,000 different club dates up north.
Good evening. My name is Jim Carrey. I'm a singing comic impressionist, and I'd like to start off this evening with a piece from the new punk ballet, Wounded Swan Lake.
By the spring of 1984, Jim's incredible impersonations had taken him far. People magazine labeled him one of America's hottest young comics.
I do about 115 or 20 characters now. Like Sammy Davis Jr., I do in my act, is very extreme. He's got this, you stick the bum out, and you get the chin happening, man. Rat pack, patty whack, give a dog a bone, man.
Jim had just made his debut on The Tonight Show and had landed the lead in a new NBC sitcom called The Duck Factory. A fresh-faced Jim Carrey talked about his newfound fame in his very first interview for Entertainment Tonight.
All my life I've really wanted to do this, so it doesn't seem like I've been in the business for a short time. It's all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I've ever done, so it seems like I've been a veteran all my life, Ready, action!
The Duck Factory starred Jim as an aspiring young cartoonist who lands a job at a Hollywood cartoon company. But the sitcom was hardly the perfect vehicle for Carrey because he was cast as the straight man, and the Duck Factory fizzled after 13 weeks.
I don't know, but I don't think they used him properly in the Duck Factory. They didn't let him go, you know?
And there was another problem, too. When he landed the Duck Factory, Jim sent for his parents, Percy and Kay, and actually invited them to Los Angeles to live with him.
I think he thought, well, you know, hey, Mom and Dad have never been anywhere. I want them to do something. And my mom was, you know, my mom and dad were movie buffs and music buffs. And so for them to go to Hollywood was like a dream, a total dream.
But when the Duck Factory ended, Jim found himself trying to support his mother and father while he attempted to rescue his career. To make matters worse, Kay's health was failing, and she needed expensive medical attention. Jim went broke and became deeply depressed. He had nightmares and dark fantasies. He quit performing altogether because he was so tired of doing impressions.
Will you please be Sylvester Stallone again, or will you do that Bruce Dern thing again? And he just, well, I'm going to wind up, you know, no offense, but I'm going to turn into Rich Little if I don't start forming my own style, you know. And so he stopped doing it.
Jim dropped out for 2 years. He spent his time going to auditions and channeling his energy into art. He created cartoon-like sculptures like the one he later made for his friend Nicolas Cage.
He did this one, actually, of me, which is starting to fall apart, but he must have made this about, I don't know, 10 years ago. I think it's like a clay that he put over wire.
Jim also created this sculpture, the amazing Coupon Kate balancing her budgets without a net. It depicts his mother walking a high wire as she tries to pay the bills. Worrying about himself and his parents finally proved to be too much. Jim decided to send his parents back home to Canada.
It was hard for him. It was just time for him to spread his wings and do his own thing. But he still felt the sense of obligation to them.
In 1985, Jim Carrey landed his first co-starring role in the comedy Once Bitten. Lauren Hutton played a seductive vampire out to bag a virgin, and Jim was the object of her desire.
What about playing a virgin? That takes a great deal of acting.
Bit of a stretch. Bit of a stretch for me, but I think I can handle it. I have enough teeth for it anyway. Look at that's my virgin look.
If you look at about 40 frames in Once Bitten, I think it was, with Lauren Hutton, he turns into Robert De Niro for about 40 frames. It goes like that. It's so fast that you want, did I really just see what I think I saw? And if you rewind it, I mean, he's Robert De Niro.
After 2 years away from the stage, Jim decided to return to stand-up comedy.
Feel really good tonight. Really good. Excellent. I just want to go.
He threw out his entire act and started over. This time, he was determined not to do impressions. And the new Jim Carrey act was wild and improvisational. He called it regression therapy.
And now, I'd like to eat my own neck. Don't try to stop me.
I remember seeing him one night going on stage with absolutely no material, just rambling off the top of his head.
He would go on stage and sometimes he'd just die. You know, he'd take such chances. I always admired him for it. And he'd just fall on his face and he'd get back up and do it again.
Well, anyway, I'd like to go way back now.
There were nights where he would be doing badly, so he would just crawl around the stage like a cockroach. And then he would like lie in the crack between the wall and the floor and see how far in he could get. And he would do his impression of a cockroach, like avoiding the vacuum. And just anything just to provoke the crowd.
Jim started writing with fellow stand-up comedian Judd Apatow. And it was during this fertile period of creative rage that Jim found his own unique comic voice by creating original characters. Fire Marshal Bill, the grotesquely disfigured pyromaniac made famous on In Living Color, found his way from Jim's twisted imagination into his stage act.
Okay. I'm going to try this trick one more time, all right? But this time you guys got to put me out.
It was also during his Comedy Store days that Jim began a relationship with an aspiring actress named Melissa Womer, who waited tables at the club. They were married on March 28, 1987, and they had a baby daughter, Jane, that very same year. Fatherhood apparently brought out Jim's maternal instincts.
Oh, totally maternal. You know, it was like they come up with the baby, you know, at Christmas time, or, you know, and it'd be like, oh, you know, change her and, you know, do the bottle thing. And it was so bizarre to see him actually do this family stuff.
He's an amazing father. To see him and Jane together is what he really lives for.
Meanwhile, Jim pursued his movie career. In Peggy Sue Got Married, he worked with Nicolas Cage, and they became great friends.
I remember thinking it would be hard for people to cast him right off the bat because they wouldn't know what to make of him. But I always knew that once they did, that it would be an explosion, which it turned out to be.
Then Clint Eastwood got a hold of Jim's audition tape, in which Jim lampooned his childhood hero. That led to his role of a psycho rock star in The Deadpool. In the comedy Earth Girls Are Easy, which starred Gina Davis, Jim and Damon Wayans played aliens. And Damon introduced Jim to his brother, Keenan Ivory Wayans, who cast him in a new show for the Fox network called In Living Color.
This is Richard Dickerson. Are you able to breathe with that?
With what?
With your proboscis there.
Oh, wow. You're making fun of my nose now? Wow, this is a real drag. Oh, wow.
Jim was the only white male on the show. It was a perfect place for him to stand out because producer Keenan Ivory Wayans was out to offend everybody equally. Jim was happy to oblige with brilliant original characterizations like Fire Marshal Bill.
Don't worry, ma'am. I am a fire marshal.
In 1991, Jim landed his own Showtime special, Jim Carrey's Unnatural Act.
Remember how fast I used to be when I was a sperm?
But Jim suffered a heartbreaking loss that year. Before the Showtime special aired in November, Jim's beloved mother, Kay, passed away, a victim of kidney failure. She never saw the dizzying fame her son would achieve. As a tribute, Jim dedicated the Showtime special to the memory of Kathleen Carey, a.k.a. Momsy.
He was there when she passed away. He had flown up. And I think she almost waited for him to be there. Yeah, it hurt him a lot. It really did. But, you know, I think he gets stronger, too.
By 1993, the third season for In Living Color, some of the original cast members had moved on. But Jim was doing his best work. Interviewers were asking if the show would ever be called The Jim Carrey Show.
No, it'll never be The Jim Carrey Show. That wasn't the concept.
But by then, Jim was already working on an offbeat, low-budget movie about a cocky pet detective named Ace. And after Ace Ventura, nothing for Jim would ever be the same.
Our biography of Jim Carrey will continue here on A&E.
On display here in the gallery of the Motion Picture Academy. As a young comic, it was clear that Jim Carrey was destined for the big time. Nobody knew just how big. But after America saw him on the comedy television show In Living Color, everything changed, and he was on his way to becoming one of the funniest guys in America.
Marker.
And background. Action.
In the summer of 1993, Jim Carrey stepped onto the set of Ace Ventura and started working with his co-star, Courtney Cox. Nobody knew quite what to expect.
No, this is my date. He's a lawyer.
Either it's going to be really incredibly hilarious or completely stupid. So, you know, there's no in between with this movie.
The script for Ace had been shopped all over Hollywood, and a few big-name comedy stars had passed on it.
Tom Ace.
But Jim Carrey saw it as an opportunity. He agreed to take on the lead role, but only if he could rewrite it and make Ace as outlandish and over the edge as his stage and TV characters had been.
Kiss it, make it to the top. Kiss it, make it to the top.
The Ace that Jim created had hair like a cockatoo and reveled in the kind of humor that makes 6-year-olds giddy.
I'm going to execute a button hook pattern super slow-mo.
There's a certain natural ability that radiates out of his comedy. Particularly the scene in Ace Ventura when he was in the tutu and he went backwards in slow motion.
Let's see that in an instant replay.
I thought, well, we're seeing something really new here.
Hi, how you doing?
On the weekend the picture opened, Jim was in Chicago to promote it. He was with his manager, Jimmy Miller, who was tracking the results at the box office. They discovered that the movie was turning into a monster hit.
And so we got an incredible report on Friday night. And then Saturday, it just kept going up. And then it dawned on everybody, it's those 6-year-old children.
Now, what can I say?
And you don't track 6-year-old kids when they walk out of a movie theater. You don't interview a 4-year-old as he comes out. But he tells everybody else. So by Sunday, you had kids that had seen the movie 2 and 3 times already. And by the following weekend, you had kids who had seen the movie 5 times.
The over-the-edge pet detective had delighted 6-year-olds everywhere. The film took in almost $38 million in 3 weeks and eventually generated $125 million in ticket sales worldwide. Overnight, Jim Carrey was a hot Hollywood talent. He didn't get an Oscar nomination, but he did get something almost as important from his dear friend, Nicolas Cage.
When I found this rat, or with a rat with a hair lip, and when Jim hit it big with Ace Ventura, my cousin Roman, myself, and our mutual friend Phil decided to present him with this award called the Obie Doby Award of Excellence, found in 1994. So we gave it to him, and that's this. And it's something that we pass around when, you know, one of us accomplishes something and we're all proud of that person's accomplishment. So now it's back here because, you know, whatever. And so it goes back and forth, and we've been doing that. So that's sort of like the open way we encourage each other.
They're rigging me to explode.
After Ace, Jim went on to work on The Mask, a movie about a mild-mannered bank teller named Stanley Ipkiss, who, through the power of the mask, magically transforms himself into a green-faced, singing, dancing, zoot-suited Looney Tune. Jim's facial conniptions were computer-enhanced, but he put his own unique mark on the characters.
My dad was a lot like the Stanley Ipkiss character. Yeah, we see Jim do stuff, and I go, oh God, that's Dad. Oh God, that's Dad. You know, it's scary.
It's the makeup and wardrobe fairies.
But even before The Mask opened in theaters, New Line, the company that produced the movie, offered Jim $7 million to star in their comedy Dumb and Dumber. The guy who spent part of his teenage years living out of a bus was suddenly wealthy beyond his dreams. But for Jim, it was never about the money.
He's never really come out and said this, but I don't think he likes the idea that it's plastered everywhere, what he's earning. You know, I don't think he wants it to overshadow the work itself. You know, that people are thinking money when they see him I don't think that ever was his intention. I do think that he felt that if that check that he wrote to himself came true, which it did, that it would not just mean money, that it would also mean that he could work with the best in the business.
In Dumb and Dumber, Jim and Jeff Daniels play a couple of good-natured but dim-witted friends who find a suitcase stuffed with cash.
There you go. There you go.
They are so dumb, they spend all the loot trying to locate the suitcase's owner. The movie was shot partially in Colorado and Utah, with Jim sporting an even uglier haircut than he had in Ace, and showing off, for the very first time as an adult, his chipped tooth.
No, this tooth was actually like this for about 6 years when I was a kid, and I loved it. It was my trademark, and then, you know, of course, when I turned 13, Mr. Happy started talking to me, saying, you might want to get that fixed.
There was nothing dim-witted about the marketing of the movie, which pulled in $250 million worldwide, and nothing goofy about the way Jim Carrey stuck to his artistic vision. One gag at the end of the picture illustrates just how stubborn Jim can be. After losing all that money and the girl, the two friends encounter a busload of beautiful women who want to carry them off into the sunset.
I remember that the studio really wanted them to get on the bus, and Jim refused. He said, my character would never be smart enough to get on that bus. He never would do it. And he goes, I understand that the crowd will like it, but he will not get on that bus. And even to this day, there are people upset that Jim wouldn't get on the bus. And he wouldn't even do one take as an option to see what would work. Because, even though this is, big business and big money, he's always going to stay true to his idea of his character or his joke.
In Living Color was finally canceled in 1994, freeing Jim to play the Riddler in Batman Forever, the third Batman movie. Jim helped breathe new life into the 5-year-old series.
We thought at the time we were taking an extraordinary chance, or I should say the world did, because Ace Ventura came out. It was a real solid hit. He had signed to do The Mask and I guess Dumb and Dumber. Those movies hadn't come out at that time, and it was our collective feeling that Jim could bring the newness to the film.
In the spring of 1995, Jim was on another movie location in the wilds of South Carolina.
It may look like a forest, but it's completely outfitted with the latest of everything. Watch.
Ding, 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 service. Ding.
He was making the sequel to Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura When Nature Calls. A lot had changed. This time, Jim was a major star, and the gags were even bigger. And nobody enjoyed it more than Jim. But Hollywood's success, like the laws of physics, seems to have its own rules of yin and yang. While Jim was working on the first Ace Ventura picture, his marriage of 7 years was falling apart. And there was more heartbreak ahead for the performer who brought laughter to millions.
Our biography of Jim Carrey will continue here on A&E. A&E's look at Jim Carrey continues here on Biography.
During the summer of 1993, Jim Carrey was in Florida shooting the original Ace Ventura movie, the film that would finally make him a star. But all those years of hard work and long hours away from home were finally taking their toll. Back in Los Angeles, his 7-year marriage to Melissa Womer was disintegrating. A year earlier, the media wouldn't have noticed. But as Jim's star began to rise, the tabloids filled with stories about his domestic problems.
It drives me crazy when I read these articles that don't have a grain of truth. I know what he's like. I know what he's like as a person. And he wouldn't dump his marriage or make his wife suffer. He's not that type of person.
Jim filed for divorce in November of '93. And there was another stunning loss for Jim the following year. The death of his father, Percy Carey.
Pretty painful thing. In many respects, it seemed like Percy was just everything to Jim.
Jim's mother, Kay, had passed away in 1991. She lived to see just a glimmer of her son's phenomenal success. After she died, Percy began to fade. His family says he died of a broken heart. His final years were certainly heartbreaking. He suffered from Alzheimer's disease and lung cancer and was weakened by chemotherapy. Towards the end, he was just a shadow of the devilishly funny figure who had worked so hard for Jim's success.
He never said this, but I felt like I got the feeling like his dad was holding on until it happened. And then when it did, my take on it is that he could let go.
On the day that Percy Carey died, Jim's manager, Jimmy Miller, called Jim's house with his condolences.
He picked up the phone, and he was just really shaken, quiet at moments, sobbing at other moments, and anxious to get home. He was on a plane, within a couple hours.
I remember standing at the graveyard, and it was raining, and the piper was playing Amazing Grace, I think it was. And he was really tough. Jimmy was very tough. And we're standing there with an umbrella. And I looked at him and I said, it's okay to cry now, man. If you want to. Because I was starting to, and I couldn't hold back anymore. I'm not that strong. And I said, ain't nobody going to know, Mo, because the rain's going to hit your face and they're not going to know it's tears, And we had a good one.
Jim wrote a check to himself years ago for acting services rendered, and put it in his pocket, or his wallet, I should say, and carried it around forever. And so when my dad passed away, Jim took the check and put it in my dad's pocket. And that meant a lot. Because it was like a signal to my dad that I made it, Dad. Now I sit and think, you know, he's got two guardian angels, one on one shoulder and one on the other. I really do. Because it's like when Mom passed away, he just started to get a little bit of success. And I think that was her little angel sitting on that shoulder. And then Dad passed away, and all of a sudden, bam, you know, and I'm sure they're both up there looking down going, yeah, go for it, you know, and proud as hell.
By 1994, Jim Carrey was on his own for the very first time in a very long while. But he didn't have time to be lonely. He was on location for Dumb and Dumber, finally living his dream.
Now it's like watching a Monopoly game of some kind or something like that. Oh, yeah, really? Okay, hotel on Boardwalk, excellent, great. It's like somebody else's life I'm living in a way. But it's great because it just means I'm going to be working a lot. So I'm happy about that. And look at the perks.
There was more than funny business afoot. Jim and his leading lady, Lauren Holly, were falling in love. Before they were ever in a scene together, they were flirting in front of a camera.
We have a fantasy sequence in here, I think, that is going to be quite amazing.
Give it to us in detail.
Give it to us in detail. Okay, I start right here. And I chew my way down.
Lauren Holly was well known to TV audiences from her dramatic roles on soap operas and on the primetime series Picket Fences. That first day on location, her biggest fear was that Jim would make her laugh.
Yes.
We haven't done a scene yet.
Exactly, right. But I have a feeling because already with Jeff Daniels, I think my hardest job was not laughing and ruining the shot. So
yeah,
I
he's
can
all right.
only imagine.
Yeah, wait till you get a load of me, baby.
Jim had noticed Lauren long before. When he was an out-of-work, angst-ridden actor, Jim watched the soaps, and Lauren Holly was his favorite soap star. Now here they were, dating. Jim's longtime friend, Wayne Fleming, found out when Jim was suddenly rushed off the location and into a Salt Lake City hospital for emergency gallbladder surgery.
So I go to the hotel, I knock on the door, and he says, I have a nurse and everything here. You know, the movie company sent me a nurse. There's this woman answers the door in a nurse's outfit. And she said, hi, I'm Nurse Holly. Well, I didn't put it all together. I didn't know. And all of a sudden she goes, you must be Wayne. I said, yeah. And she said, well, come on in. So I take one step forward. She jumps up in the air, throws her legs around my waist, and I'm walking in with this girl in my arms, and I still don't know. So I get in, and he's laying in the Chesterfield just howling. And he's trying not to laugh too hard because he's going to hurt himself, you know. And so I went, hey, nice nurse you got here. So I said, where's your girlfriend? And he goes, you're holding her. Put her down. And I went, whoa!
In Dumb and Dumber, Jim's character pines for Lauren. But in the end, he finally gets to kiss her. MTV called it the year's best on-screen kiss. It was art imitating life. And these days, they go everywhere together.
They're so cute together. They're, you know, in that cuddly cutie stage. You know, when you're going out with somebody and you want to puke, you know, they're so cute together.
They're so happy. I hate them. I just hate their guts for their pure joy. I mean, they look too good together. They glow. It's spooky.
For more information about exciting A&E programming, You were watching our biography of Jim Carrey here on A&E.
With a career that's taken him to the heights and beautiful Lauren Holly by his side, Jim Carrey seems to be a man who has everything. And in June of 1995, it gets even better. Sony Pictures offers Jim $20 million to star in their comedy, The Cable Guy. The richest deal ever for a comic actor. Jim studies the offer.
He looks at it and understands it and appreciates it and gets giddy and really giddy, where he just starts laughing and he just, at a certain point, and just look at you and, you know, it's like having a movie screen in front of you. All of a sudden you have Jim Carrey's face in front of you and he's just going, oh my God, we did it.
Jim filmed The Cable Guy in the winter of '96. In it, he explores the same comedic theme that runs through a lot of his other work.
Transferred to one Robin Harris. Smells like heartbreak to me.
I think one of the things that Jim finds funny is confidence. If you look at his characters, a lot of them are really cocky. Ace Ventura is the most confident guy in the world, and in the end, he pulls it off. The Mask is about a guy who finds his confidence and finds that part of himself. Even the Riddler is like a psychotic, confident guy. And the Cable Guy is a guy who is so insecure and has no self-esteem and makes up for it by the fact that he acts incredibly confident, but you can see in his eyes that he knows he's a complete loser. And that's always been something that Jim finds funny.
If it all disappeared tomorrow, Jim Carrey would have memories for a lifetime, including the day he considers to be the most incredible so far, November 2nd, 1995. On that day, he was immortalized in Hollywood.
For Jim, there's certainly been a lot of highs through this, this meteor of the last couple years, but clearly I would say the biggest would be the footprint ceremony at the Mann's Chinese Theater with Clint Eastwood.
It was a family affair on Hollywood Boulevard. Jim shared it with his show business family. He shared it with longtime friends, and he even flew in his relatives from Canada. His sister Rita was in her glory.
These are the people that encouraged me.
People are banging on our limousines going, Jim, 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 and we're inside going, so Jim, And then Jim pulled up, and I couldn't have been prouder. I mean, it was just amazing that he actually, it's there forever. It's permanent, you can't take it away.
Well, I went over there, and there was a big crowd of people there, and they went nuts for him, and the crowd started cheering, and someone else just waved. But he ran over to him and said hello here, and hello there, and hello there, and they just idolized him, and they deservedly so. He's great.
It just seemed like he had not only arrived as a tremendous performer, but he had arrived as a great star. His grace was there. He had a terrific amount of grace, especially in dealing with, the people who love him, his fans.
The best things in life are undescribable. Thank you so much.
Then, with his daughter Jane and his real-life leading lady Lauren Holly by his side, Jim Carrey pressed his hands and his feet into the wet cement. He signed it and added the inscription, "Merrily, merrily, merrily, merrily."
So that's why he wrote, "Merrily, merrily, merrily, life is but a dream." Because that's what it is. Life is but a dream for him. And I think it would have been a wonderful dream if his mom and dad had been there for that. That would have been pretty cool.
His daughter Jane is now going to come in to help him out. That's lovely.
And as the world watched, Jim Carrey put his daughter's thumbprints into the cement too. Hers are the ... after the final merrily.
Well, I think that he wanted to include her, in this terrific day. He wanted her to be there and be a part of it. I thought it was a very fatherly thing to do.
Only time will tell how long Jim Carrey's star will shine. Overnight sensations come and go. But Jim's friends unanimously agree that he is no flash in the pan. They also agree that success has not spoiled Jim Carrey.
I worry about him because he's always been so nice. He's really a nice person. Then when you think about everybody wanting to snack on him, now that he is this huge superstar, you wonder how can you maintain your natural way, which is to be so nice, and is that going to make him edgy, or is he going to be able to handle it? But he hasn't changed at all.
We may yet see Jim Carrey, the dramatic actor. His management team is looking for non-comic roles to broaden his appeal. And some of the top people in the industry think Jim has what it takes to get serious.
Without question. He starts off by being a handsome guy. He's tall, has very good presence. He's very intelligent, very bright. He's a guy who prepares himself perfectly well before he goes out. He should never stay totally away from comedy because it's a gift, and one that he, I hope, will always share with the world. But at the same time, it shouldn't be all he does. He should mix and become much more diversified.
In this scene, my legs are being consumed by two vicious malamutes. It's quite exciting.
Oh, God, get them off!
He hasn't changed at all. And I want people to know that since the day I've met him, he is the same person as he is today. I mean, the proof of that is we're still friends. He's not one of these guys that took off and forgot everybody. Jim never forgets anybody. And that's what people can't believe about him, is that, wow, he's such a great guy. And that's because he is. Truly is.
One thing is certain. For this young man at the top of his game, the laughs will go on. Merrily, merrily, merrily.
Jim Carrey is the latest in a long line of comedians who hold a special place in the hearts of comedy lovers. Like the Three Stooges, like Abbott and Costello, like Jerry Lewis before him, he's making a living playing idiots and laughing all the way to the bank. Tomorrow, Biography's look at Hollywood's hottest stars continues with the profile of a man who became a superstar despite a funny-sounding name, an even funnier-sounding accent, and absolutely no experience as an actor, but who was going to argue with the former Mr. Universe. The remarkable success story of Arnold Schwarzenegger tomorrow on Biography. Until then, from Hollywood, I'm Peter Graves for A&E. Thanks for watching.
Clint Eastwood. Now you can own a video cassette of this program. Call 1-800-423-1212 and you will receive the program you've just seen for only $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-423-1212. Charles Bronson.